Okay, there we go. All right. It does have the title, which is awesome. Okay. Hello. We are live for trauma and autoimmune disease. I'm going to wait a few minutes to see if people pop in. I might fix my hair because it's 90% humidity, like literally, and it's terrible here. Hello, people. Hello. Ow. Cilantro. I like that name. Hello, Laura. Hi, Terry. Cilantro. I am just putting my hair up because it's a bajillion. Actually, it's not a bajillion degrees right now. It's like 70, but it's 90% humidity. So, like, is going on. Hello. Wave. I like to wave to people. Wave. Hello. Hi. Okay. So I think Instagram's changed their live stuff since I've done this last. But I think we're good to go. Hello from Washington State. It's interesting. I was just, hi, Christy. I was just talking to one of my clients and talking about how she's on the West Coast. The West Coast is burning and the East Coast is a swamp. So it's quite a dichotomy of weather going on at the moment. But yeah, so say hello. Let me know where you're popping in from. Hopefully I can save this and send it out to the world, but Instagram sometimes has a mind of its own. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, just making sure everything's fine. All right, so let's get going. So, as I said, today we're going to be talking about the connection between trauma and autoimmune disease, and then we're going to talk about how to fix it. Well, not necessarily fix it, because like that's not the best word, but how to work with it and try to get yourself out of that cycle. Hello, Mary Ellen. So I have some notes here, so I'll probably be going back and forth between the video and notes. But so I posted a post and asked if this resonated with you yesterday. It was kind of about the trauma response cycle. So I don't know if anyone saw that or like kind of resonated with that at all, but it's kind of, so it doesn't necessarily only happen with trauma. I've found this kind of a reactionary cycle of like you're going through your day, and then bam, a trigger happens. And that could be like a conversation with someone. It could be someone saying something mean to you. It could be someone saying anything to you. It could be a situation. Hello again. And then, so trigger happens and then we react immediately. And we're like, wah! Like whatever the reaction is, like however we kind of cope with things, if that's like either to lash out at someone or to kind of go fight, flight, freeze kind of thing and just kind of hide, it's going to trigger some kind of response in you. And I was talking in my Facebook group, or asked in my Facebook group if there's any questions about this, and someone responded that without even seeing that little meme that I posted, I don't think she did, but she said that like trauma, it like kind of these reactions like just take over and it feels like impossible to kind of get yourself out of that, and like there's no way to change that at all. Which that's exactly how it feels, but that is not the actuality of it. There is some ways to get out of this cycle, and that's what we're going to talk about at the end. But I'm going to talk a little bit at the beginning about how, like what happens in trauma, like what it kind of sets up in our bodies and how that's connected to autoimmune disease at all. And then we're going to talk about some ways to start working out of that cycle, that kind of like that trigger reaction, like meltdown, whatever happens, and then probably symptoms ensue and like everything. So we'll talk about how to get out of that. Okay, so my camera's pretty close to the edge, so I'm going to try to not make it fall over. Okay. So as I was saying, like so when we encounter trauma, there we go, not enter. So like the traumatic event happens, or we encounter a trigger from the traumatic event, and that's going to make our fight, flight, freeze system, like our kind of parasympathetic or sympathetic system kind of go haywire. And so usually in like kind of ancestral speak, this situation happened. We were running from a lion. We were trying to save ourselves. Like we were doing something, fighting someone, and our cortisol is going here, and then it shoots up to handle the acute situation, and then it's supposed to come back down. So like we have these kind of waves like this, like ancestrally speaking, of our kind of cortisol and stress hormones. But now especially if you've had trauma in your past, or kind of just living in existence, our cortisol levels are usually up here and doing this instead of doing like the nice, like response to an acute stressor and then you come down. Right now, especially with the history of trauma or kind of just living life, like we're all the way up here all the time, like with traffic, with kid stress, with pandemic stress. Like my favorite line lately is like, everyone is living up here right now, which because everyone is so not everyone, most people are living up here right now because everyone's so reactionary. Hello, wave to you. So this kind of constant up here, either due to like traffic, like I said, kids or whatever, or past trauma, is really kind of just turning our bodies on for stress. So that's going to like bring on, it can bring on autoimmune disease, fibro, fatigue, all sorts of stuff. And so then this PTSD kind of trauma reaction to regular stuff is also causing immune system issues. So it's shockingly creating low cortisol, because if you're kind of in too much of a cortisol state, it'll kind of get a little haywire, like in the biology of it. Because cortisol also kind of sends a signal to like, we're ending the trauma, or we're ending the need for stress hormones. So it can also create low cortisol, which is a little bit screwy. It can cause like high epinephrine, adrenaline, all those things. It makes your HPA axis, like if you've heard of adrenal fatigue, so that's your hypopituitary adrenal axis, on overdrive. So you're kind of you're spinning like this. So then obviously your sympathetic system activity is increased cytokines, and then increased inflammation. So all of these things like are a back end result to the either trauma or kind of living up here. So, and like in someone who has experienced trauma, like hormones and cortisol don't really act appropriately. And so like they kind of lead to like the staying up here kind of state, and like kind of feeling like you're stuck in this trauma response. And especially if your trauma had to do with like not being able to move, like feeling really out of control. Hey Jen, I wave to you. I have a DM from you to respond to, which I know. But yeah, so like eventually, like especially if you cannot move or feel like your agency is taken away in the traumatic event, like you could technically move, but you did not feel safe to move, then your body is going to perpetually think it's in danger. And especially when it gets activated, it's going to go right back to that frozen state of like, I can't move. So we'll talk about how to kind of get out of that cycle in a little bit. And obviously the activation kind of occurs faster than in people who are not traumatized. So like if you have that trauma history, you're going to go right back to it. Sorry, my husband walked in. Go away. I'm doing something. I'm live on Instagram if you want to come talk. He just went and ran away. Anyway, so they've done these kind of scans to look at your normal person's brain, which no one's normal, and then a traumatic brain. And so someone who's experiencing a trigger or a traumatic event very similarly to when they were triggered in the past, is the brain looks just like it's experiencing trauma. So those kind of centers in your brain that go off, like the emotional center lights up, the visual part sometimes lights up, sometimes it goes away. The speech centers shut down. So like in a traumatic, and like when you are triggered, you are experiencing it as you were being like you're being traumatized. I think there's a lot of shame that can happen around this, of like people are like, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I reacting this way? Like there's something wrong that like I can't get out of this cycle. But there's nothing actually wrong with you. It's your body biologically trying to keep you safe. It's taking what it learned in the past and is applying it to now to try to get you out of that cycle, which isn't necessarily happening, but your brain thinks it is. So it's trying to protect you. So really, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with anyone who's kind of in this cycle. It's your brain like essentially hijacking you to kind of keep you in this cycle, because it just really wants to keep you safe. Like that's the number one job of your brain, is to keep you alive. Also why it's so hard to change, but that's a whole nother topic. So because of this, like in the moment, that's why like talking to someone or getting to like someone's like, oh, calm down. When in the history of keep calm. When in the history of anything has, oh, just calm down, worked. Because it just doesn't work that way. Like, you have to kind of go into a treatment from a non kind of verbal point of view. So that's why, like, talking about this kind of doesn't necessarily help, because it kind of just keeps you in that cycle. Hello. Just waving to everyone. So yeah, so that's why, like, verbal kind of therapy, like the talk therapy method, hello again, isn't necessarily all that effective. It can be. There are certain points and times about it, but just kind of talking and rehashing trauma isn't really the best way to treat it. And so way back when I was in school for psychology therapy, that's one of the things that we learned was, like, talking about trauma is the way to get through it. But now with new research, obviously, kind of talking about trauma might put someone right back into that place of being triggered. So it's probably not the best in actuality. But we're figuring that out, and we're talking about that and trying to get new somatic kind of body ways to process this. And that's what we talk about at the end. So yeah, so like, people know about dissociation too. Like, that's when, so people can, like, kind of dissociate during the trauma, like during the event, and kind of get sent right back there, when they are triggered too. Hello, wave to you. So, like, kind of sensory information and kind of information becomes fragmented, and you'll kind of just, you can go down, like, either like a thinking path from it, or like you're feeling a lot of feelings from the past event. And so this is kind of how flashbacks start. Like what I was just saying, like, you could kind of go down either avenue of, like, all of the memories get, like, stored, and then you could kind of have a flashback to, like, what you were thinking, how you were feeling, like what you were smelling, seeing, like those kind of things. Yes, I am going to, hopefully this will be saved, and I will hopefully save this and kind of send it out, but Instagram's kind of weird sometimes, so hopefully this will be saved. So yeah, so I think, so these kind of overreactions and flashbacks. So this is what I was talking about too, of, like, people feeling guilty, like they're feeling hijacked, like that this is not their body. Like, they're like, I don't know why I'm reacting like this. Like, so this happened to me a lot too. So, like, I was in a very, like, emotionally abusive relationship in the past, and hey, I haven't seen you in a while. And so then I was in a new relationship, and then so if we got into an argument, or like I heard a voice raised at all, I would just shut down and be like, nope, I can't do this. I can't do this with you. Even though it was, like, a nice normal conversation, it really brought me back to when I was in a whole nother relationship. So and then I'd be like, well, I know this isn't, like, an us thing, and I'm really sorry, and I'd get confused, and I feel bad about it, but it's just kind of, it was my body and my brain just getting kind of hijacked based on my past. So I think that can bring on a lot of shame for people. Like I was saying at the beginning, people think that their reactions are crazy, and that they're very, like, they're overreacting, and people in your life may even tell you that you're overreacting too, and kind of like, why are you reacting like this? Like, I just said hi, or I just said we need to talk. Like, why are you acting like this? So then that kind of brings on, like, oh, you're going to avoid things and not want to talk to people about things, and, like, shame just takes over. So there are ways out of this, and it is not your fault that you're kind of stuck in this cycle either. So an interesting kind of new area of education that's coming out, or research, has anyone heard of, like, the polyvagal theory, maybe? So this is an interesting way of kind of looking at our response to trauma. And it talks about the role of the vagus nerve in, like, emotional connection and then trauma response. So our vagus nerve, I've talked about this ad infinitum, kind of goes from here-ish all the way down to our kind of sacral region. So our polyvagal. So it kind of innervates, so it's our cranial nerve 10, and it kind of hits everything, our breathing, our heart rate, our gut, kind of everything. So when we are triggered or in a traumatic event, our vagus nerve gets activated. So the first so the polyvagal theory kind of has three sections in the social engagement system. So when we are triggered or have a traumatic event, our first reaction is to call out for help, to be like, hey, someone help me. And when that doesn't work, we go into fight, flight, freeze, and run away, freeze, or fight or flight, either run away or fight. Then the third one is the freeze and collapse. And so when we feel like all of our social, like people are not there, like we kind of feel abandoned about it, then we get into the freeze and collapse. So these are all kind of different hierarchical kind of responses from our nervous system and our vagus nerve. So like people who faint, they just kind of, in a traumatic event, they've just gone right to collapsing. And their body's like, no, we need to shut this down. We cannot process this right now. And we will have to do this at a later date. So it kind of depends on like your past trauma, like how you deal with it, like your vagal nerve, like how well that's functioning. So this is why I talk about the vagus nerve so much and all the things that we can do about it. So switching gears a little bit to an interesting study that was done on adverse child events. So that's basically trauma. It was talking about like kind of the big T thing. So I think trauma obviously exists on a spectrum of like, there's oftentimes people talk about it as big T or little t trauma. So big T trauma is like your domestic violence, abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, kind of really things that challenge or make you like not safe, challenge your safety. And there's like little t things, like maybe being bullied, that could be a big T too. Like being bullied or like not having a lot of friends, like kind of little things that really disrupt your life, but not as big as like an abuse or something like that. So it's 10 things that are kind of like the big T, like I said, like abuse, neglect, loss, domestic violence, those things. So like every point you say yes to, your increase, you get your risk of getting an autoimmune disease increases by 10%. So for women over a score of 2, so that's two things happening to you. So either abuse, neglect, domestic violence, your risk of being hospitalized by an autoimmune disease goes up 70%. So that is why I think we are the autoimmune disease population is just such a population of people who have been hurt, are women, and are trying to find control in other ways. My hypothesis. So like it's not only necessarily autoimmune disease, but like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia are also included in that too. So I think, as I was just alluding to, like the trauma and autoimmune disease are kind of like this, because it just really does hijack your whole entire system, your immune system. It can increase inflammatory proteins and cytokines and things like that. And then it just kind of keeps us stuck in that loop of like increased stress, increased cortisol, increased like screwed up hormones because of it. So we're stuck in that cycle. And then because we have I don't want to say inability, but difficulty with managing all of this, autoimmune disease is born easily. So how to kind of work yourself out of this. So I will say that working with a trauma-informed therapist is going to be really important. It's not the be-all, end-all, because not all therapists are trauma-informed and not all therapists kind of understand how trauma works. So finding someone that explicitly says they work with trauma and are trauma-informed care and even talk about like polyvagal, like that is who you want to be working with, not just like any old therapist who doesn't mention trauma, because they might not know. And in looking at kind of some responses lately from therapists who were trained around the same time I was, they don't really know. And I was just kind of lucky to go into a trauma kind of track. Hey, Liam. To kind of learn all of that. So the first kind of, I hate to say prerequisite to trying to heal trauma is you need to feel grounded. You need to feel safe and aware of your body and self, and you need to be kind of aware of that. So like if you are going into therapy like in a or kind of trying to figure this out in like kind of a non-aware state, like it's not going to be as impactful as if like you have kind of worked on this stuff first. So grounding is really important, like knowing where you are. One of my favorite kind of grounding things for like when people are feeling dysregulated is like 5 things you see. Like what do you see around you right now? 4 things you smell, or like things you touch, things like that. So kind of just be aware of like your surroundings. Like, okay, I feel that it's like really humid in the air right now. There's not many smells. I see like all my books around me. Like, so I'm aware of my surroundings. I'm aware of my body. I'm aware of my feet touching the ground. Like, so that's kind of the state you want to be starting from, like just aware of where you are in space. Because a lot of times trauma in these past situations can hijack our brain, like we were talking about. So I could be standing here, but I could be thinking of an argument that I had with like that abusive ex ages ago. Or I could be thinking about something else. But that is not the state you want to be working on this stuff in. You want to be like, okay, I'm here. I am in my house. I am standing and just aware of what you're doing. So there's another 2 kind of ways to working with trauma. So one is to strengthen your body's ability to monitor bodily sensations. And so that's a mouthful, but essentially that means being able to connect to your body a lot more. So like to know when your heart rate is increasing, or like to know when your breathing is increasing. So like you want to be able to be in touch with your body and like to know, to be able to feel your body essentially. Because a lot of times, having dealt with trauma, you kind of shut that connection off as a self-preservation technique. So I think increasing that connection, which can be scary. So that's why working with someone can be really helpful in kind of this process. And then you want to also be recalibrating like how your autonomic nervous system works, like through breath, movement, touch, that kind of thing. So when I was saying in my Facebook group, someone was like, I feel like these kind of reactions are automatic and we can't stop them. And of course it feels like that because they kind of are right now. They are very automatic. But you can start to regulate that through breath, through movement, through touch, all those kind of things. So there are a lot of options like through working through trauma. A lot of these have to do within the therapy context. So like CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. So that's going to help you. This is a talk therapy thing where you identify like the triggers and you identify the situations that are going on that kind of bring on these feelings. And then you work to figure out alternate behaviors to do. So like, for example, self-talk, the only thing that's coming to mind is like self-talk for CBT, but like catastrophizing. So you go so maybe because of past trauma, like you have learned that things are always like the worst that they can be, even though that's not necessarily true. But like that's immediately where you go to. Hey, Lisa. So like something happens, you're like immediately worst case scenario. So in CBT, you could work to be like identifying that of like, okay, I go to immediate worst case scenario when something happens. So an exercise could be to write out all the possible outcomes, possibly, instead of just jumping right to the worst case scenario. You could be like, okay, well, if that could happen, then all the good things can happen too. And like you kind of you write those out and acknowledge that as much of a possibility as the bad thing as the good thing. So that's kind of CBT is like you go through like specific behaviors and like you find alternate behaviors and things like that. And then CPT is cognitive processing therapy. So it's very similar. It just kind of, you kind of figure out like the incorrect like conclusions that you're coming to and then find other alternates for them. One of the other wonderful things in terms of therapy can be EMDR. So EMDR is where you're with a trained EMDR therapist and they talk you through they will bring up a script of the trauma or like past trauma or kind of the situation, and then they will walk you through specific eye movements to get both hemispheres back online. So the left hemisphere of our brain, like the thinking, reason, like logic, goes offline when you're in trauma. When you've had a trauma experience and then kind of keep getting triggered, your left hemisphere just goes done. Hello. So you want those two sides to be talking. And so EMDR is a great way to kind of get those two sides talking again and to help lower the kind of hijacked emotional response. So it sounds a little weird, but there's a lot of data behind it actually, but you'll kind of like be looking in different, your therapist will talk you through like a script, and then you'll be kind of doing different eye movements to get your two hemispheres of your brain back online and then to lower the stress response. So I think that's a wonderful choice for getting to heal trauma. Another thing is EFT. So our EFT or tapping, so emotional freedom technique, tapping. I personally love this. I find that this has most in the moment help for me. So you rate your whatever feeling. So I'll use an example. So I'm feeling anxious about talking to someone, having a hard conversation later. I'll say that. So you would say, okay, I'm feeling an 8 out of 10 about this conversation that I have to have later. And then you're going to be tapping on all different points. So you're going to tap here, 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 and here. These points are acupuncture points. And if you have been following along, you also notice that they are very similar to lymph points, which is not a coincidence either. So you would kind of you'd have a setup statement. So I've already rated my anxiety. It's 8 out of 10. And so I would say, even though I am having extreme anxiety about this conversation I need to have, I deeply love and accept myself. And so I would say this probably 3 to 5 times. So even though I'm having anxiety about this conversation, I deeply love and accept myself. And again. And then you would go, this anxiety. And you're just focusing on the emotion. This anxiety. This anxiety. This anxiety. This anxiety. Hey, like Daniela. This anxiety. This anxiety. And then you would probably do it again a few times. And then you'd be like, okay, well, how now do I feel? How do I feel now? There we go. And hopefully your anxiety, your fear, your whatever emotion that you were targeting has gone down a few points. And I think that is the most impactful for in the moment. Absolutely. Oh, I wave to you. Hello. And then mindfulness, like meditation and yoga, are obviously really helpful. Like deep breathing, doing kind of breath work. Anything that helps you to integrate into your body is going to be really important. And one of the biggest things is awareness. So try to be, hey, Sabrina, I haven't seen you in forever. So like one of the biggest things is to be aware. So try, like, I know it's scary, but kind of being aware of these like triggered moments sounds scary, but it's not as scary as just being like hijacked by your brain and emotions. But try, like, if this is like totally new to you and you're like, I need to try to work on this stuff, just the awareness is going to be so important. And that's going to be impactful as itself, just being aware. So you could be like, okay, I'm just trying to be aware of like when I'm feeling X emotion. So if you're trying to like notice your anxiety, like whenever you get to like a 5 out of 10 or higher, you notice that and maybe write it down and be like, okay, well, what is the situation? Like what is going on here? And then you can start to be like, okay, and then connect the dots and be like, okay, well, every time I leave the house, my anxiety spikes, or every time I see this person, my anxiety spikes, or whatever the emotion is. And then you can go from there, like with all that data and information, and be like, okay, well, this person or this situation is really triggering to me. So I need to do some work beforehand in order to kind of go into it without anxiety or whatever the emotion is. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I wanted to impart was, yes, this is kind of an automatic process and it's not your own fault, but there is a way out of it. You can kind of stop the cycle, and start to take back your own emotions and your own reactions. So yeah, any thoughts, questions that came up? I don't think I saw any. Some waves. Hello. Okay. Well, I know that takes a second, so I'll wait if anyone has questions. But yeah, if there's no questions, then I will sign off. Let me see. Nope. I can't save it from here, I don't think. I don't know how this works now. Oh well. Okay. Well, oh, you're welcome. I hope this was helpful, and I will talk to you later.